All right, so continuing then, our next objective, once we have understood how we perceive ourselves, this is self-concept, all right? The next objective is to move on to how we perceive others. So that's why I put question marks popping up here, and you start to wonder, instead of who am I, who is this other person? What is this other person about? Who are they? And what is this person about really? But before we get into that, I thought it would be a good idea to perhaps have a general understanding of perception, because we're talking about person perception, right? But it's general perception, which is the interpretation of reality. We all perceive reality according to our senses. And that's why two people can see the same thing, just like person perceptions. We can see the same person and interpret that person differently. I'll use some examples very soon, okay? So in these general examples here, in image 1, what do you see? I'll give you about 5 seconds. Right. Some people will say they see glossy legs, right? Shiny legs. And it took me a while, but that's our interpretation of reality, right? We see it with our eyes. And of course, it's really dry legs, but with whiteout on them, right? Liquid paper, whiteout. Do you guys still use that? All right. And for the second slide, what is the color of these strawberries? Does it look like a light red? It does to me, right? But it's not a single red pixel in that image, actually. Cyan is used throughout the image, but our brain is actually color correcting the image via something known as color constancy. So the lesson here then is that perception is an interpretation of reality. We use our senses, which to help determine things. Two people might see these images very differently. Multiple people might see it very differently. And similarly, when we get into person perception and how you perceive others to be, you are, of course, going to be, and this is all leading into the final objective where you are susceptible to certain biases because we rely on our senses, and different people, of course, will tend to perceive things a bit differently according to their senses, all right? Some may have a better sense of smell, touch in general, but then when it comes to people, we are much more susceptible to biases, as you will see. So, person perception. Why is my camera so bright? Person perception is the process of receiving and interpreting the messages of our senses, which we just spoke about, to provide order and meaning to the environment. That's what we talk about general perception. But person perception, we're interpreting messages from someone else to try to provide order and meaning in our understanding of that other person or persons. Okay? So, 1 second. So what we have here is a nice example illustrating, well, it's not an example, I'll give you some examples, is the process of person perception. It's actually a process for general perception as well, but we can use it for person perception, where we have a perceiver, a target, and a situation. 3 components in any perceptual process. So we want to use it for person perception because in OB, that's what we're concerned about, right? How do we perceive others? And then that will lead into the final objective, which will be some of the biases we tend to commit. So we can then move on to how we can try to minimize those biases. All right, let's see. First, we have the perceiver. And the perceiver, think about that as yourself. You are influenced by things like your experience. So if we're talking about general perception and you had a bad experience, say purchasing a product, so let's say you purchase a product from, I don't want to be sued for defaming any company, but let's say you purchase a product from well, this is factual, right? Let's say you purchase a product from Microsoft and it malfunctioned, okay? Which can happen. So you purchase a product from Microsoft and it malfunctioned. That might lead to your purchasing of Microsoft. You might expect purchasing Microsoft products in the future, those products to be of poor quality. So you might start to associate Microsoft with poor quality just based on your experience with purchasing a Microsoft product in the past. Perhaps 1 or 2 products you bought from them and it didn't function well. I personally, I've had bad experiences with Samsung products, for instance. In the past, I purchased Samsung. Well, I didn't purchase it, but I had a Samsung TV given to me. I purchased 2 Samsung phones, and they all eventually started to run pretty choppy. So And therefore, in future, I generally try to avoid Samsung if I could, right? Again, that's based on my individual experiences. The reality is, I may have just been unlucky, and Samsung is in fact a fantastic brand. Some of the newer phones do look fantastic, okay? Even though I'm still hesitant based on my experiences. So that's how it can affect my perception of the target, which would be Samsung in that case. Of course, this applies to people as well. If you've had a bad experience with a person in the past, let's say you pass somebody at UWI in the morning and they didn't say good morning, you say, hey, good morning, and they didn't reply, or they looked away, or they watched you funny, you may say, well, that person's rude. I'm not gonna acknowledge them in the future. Right? So based on your experience there, you might say, well, yeah, I had a bad experience with that person. Therefore, I think they are rude, discourteous, and it affects your behavior. So your perception affects your behavior, right? Which is something we'll get into. Second, your motivational state. So of course, the state you are in, your needs in particular, can determine how you perceive things. So we're talking about motivational state and your needs. A good example, if you look at needs that people tend to have, and there's some, even though Maslow's need, which we'll see next week, even though that hierarchy is not well supported, there's still some evidence to support the idea that human beings have needs, right? Let's suppose you have that, you come to class, one of my classes in the morning, and you, as a perceiver, you have a high need for companionship. So you're a lonely university student, and you come to class, sorry, you have to stop for the poll. You come to class with this need for companionship. Walk to your seat, and let's say you're a guy, right? And a beautiful young lady, assuming that's what you're interested in, young ladies, or lady, right? Or girls, to be politically correct, right? So let's say that's what you're interested in. And yeah, she says, hi, good morning, with a smile, another wink, that'll be pushing it. Maybe just a smile. Hi, good morning. And of course, your state, your motivational state, that need for companionship might cause you to perceive that smile with the good morning as, well, guys, I GT, right? I got through. This is it. She's interested in me. Woohoo, finally. You know, that's what you say, right? GT. I'm using the optical jargon, like GT. So that might cause you to misperceive an action from someone of the opposite sex, and whom you are interested, as that, hey, I have a chance here. So there's certainly influence how you perceive something when that smile and good morning may have just been the person being courteous. Okay. Third, we have emotional state. Emotional state is just, of course, emotions, and this is something we will cover during Carnival Week, because it's such a powerful topic that has a huge impact on the way we interact, our behaviors, our perceptions, and so on. If someone is in this emotional state, let's cite a work example, someone who has this fear of losing their job. So they have high levels of job insecurity, and there's that fear, that emotional fear that they lose their job. They may perceive a critical comment from their boss as being more than that. They may say, well, okay, the boss said, hey, Paul, I need to shape up in this area here, you're not really putting in your weight. And they have this concept of, they might perceive that comment as, that's it, I'm going to get fired tomorrow. I need to pack up my stuff. Of course, the state, the emotional state, can cause them to misperceive that critical comment as being more than it really is, which is just a critical comment to improve things, okay? So that's the perceiver, and those are how the 3 dimensions of a perceiver can influence their perception. The second component in the model is the targets. Now, ambiguous targets, and we're mainly talking about ambiguity, although there are other factors with regards to the target, such as appearance, as you'll see when we get into biases and so on. But ambiguity and ambiguous targets are susceptible to the interpretation and addition of meaning. And by that I mean, when we don't know enough about a target, we tend to try to reduce that ambiguity by providing meaning to the target to reduce the ambiguity. So for instance, let's think about the first day of class. when you all met me on the first day of class. I don't know if you could take just a few seconds to remember the first day of class. When I stepped in, I was a very ambiguous target, all right? You knew nothing about me, but you would, of course, at that point, try to provide some meaning. You would have seen certain things, looked out for certain cues, and try to form, again, this leads into the whole topic of biases. You try to form certain impressions of me. Well, I think he looks maybe strict, or he looks, based on certain looks, I don't know, maybe the clothing I'm wearing or something, you try to attach meaning to it, right? Maybe the way I walked in, maybe the color of my briefcase, I don't know what it was, right? My really messy hair, I don't know. And you may have said, well, gosh, he looks disorganized. What you were trying to do is you had this person you didn't know anything about, and you were trying to attach meaning to that person to reduce ambiguity. And we all do it. Of course, that does not mean that we're improving our perceptual accuracy. It simply means that this is what we tend to do. So there might clearly be a difference, and you can think about it now. Is there a difference between what you perceive then and what you perceive now? And what you perceive now a bit more accurate, right? So I would think over time, perceptual accuracy can increase. And as you learn more about me, especially by that icebreaker exercise that I try to use, knowing very well that I'm an ambiguous target on the very first day. The final component to the perceptual process is the situation. And perception occurs in some situational context, and that affects what is perceived. Let's say, for instance, in a workplace context, it is promotion week, right? So this is the week in which a short list of candidates are going to get promoted. You know you have been shortlisted, and the boss comes over to you and say, I find you've been doing a good job recently, you've been doing some good work. I really appreciate what you've been doing. You might perceive that comment as, but I'm getting the promotion, I'm going to get that promotion. The boss just told me I'm doing a good job. But that's because of the situation is causing you to sort of change your perception. If the situation was not promotion week, how would you have perceived that comment? If you know that week you weren't going to have a chance to be promoted, you may have just perceived that comment as good recognition from the boss. The boss is recognizing my efforts. I'm so happy for that. And nothing else. But the promotion week situation, of course, can influence how you perceive it. If you think about a simple example, let's say we have Carnival coming up, right? Let's say I came to class this week. That was my plan. I was going to come to class this week with short pants, sneakers, bareback, with a rag, and wave my rag in front of the class, jump up to some soca music, and say, good morning, OB class, or when I say good morning, OB posse, hail you out like that, right? What would you think? We say, let me see my OB posse there. We say, good morning, and maybe sing some song. And it's not to sing a song and make a song out of it. You say, well, boy, Paul finally went crazy. It was only a matter of time. We knew he was on, he was on the borderline there. He's gonna be crazy at some point. And here it is. Yeah, you might have perceived that, right? You might have said, well, I'm a madman, right? But if you saw me like that in a fete, right? Same rag, same short pants, or maybe Carnival Monday, Carnival Tuesday, rag, short pants, and he came up to me and say, hey, Paul, how are you good? I say, hey, pick up my OB posse, right? And then he would have said, well, okay, cool, let's jump up together, right? And no problem, let's leave a rag on OB rag, I don't know, right? So, God, that'd be so horrible. We wear OB rags to Carnival Monday. The thing is, you didn't change. The target remained the same in both scenarios. The only thing that changed was the situation. But of course, even though the target being me was the same in both situations, yeah, the only thing that changed was the situation. And you see how a simple change in the situation, not so simple, perhaps very dramatic, can affect your perception of me. On the one hand, you would have said, well, in a classroom context, I'm a crazy person. But on the other hand, in a different situation, like on the road, Carnival Monday or Tuesday, you'd have said, well, Paul is a Carnival baby. He likes Carnival and he's cool. That's great. So simple change of situation, even though the target remains the same, can affect your perception of me. Okay. All right. So right away, you should have been starting to think about, well, perception is obviously not necessarily going to be accurate. And this will take us on to the final objective. I'm not sure why my camera is still flickering on my end. Perhaps it's just on my end. I'll check the recording after to see. But this will take us on to the final objective, which will be the perceptual biases, right? Now, there's a tattoo game I was going to do if we had a face-to-face class, but I will skip it. I'll pause the video for now, and I'll get into the final objective, which will be the perceptual biases. This game was actually supposed to be linked to the perceptual biases, but we couldn't go through those biases without it, okay? So I'll just stop the recording here for now.